All right, we're ready to go.
Wait. I gotta get to...
We're going to start with our sponsors while you're getting the page. We are sponsored by Mr. Loiterman of Norfolk, Virginia. Thanks, Dad. In honor of the Kahal Yereim and the Kahal Yereim Daf Yomi program. Daf Yomi is also sponsored this week by Rabbi Glenn Black, Zecher Nishmas Nechemia Ben Yaakov, Zichron Levracha. And today's daf is sponsored by Brian and Michelle Schiffman. Right? B'zchus a refuah shlema for Ephraim ben Shifra. Perhaps refuah shlema. Okay, we have the last little bit of Kuf Ayin Vav of Baba Basra to finish, as our Daf Yomi does 7 pages over this week, 4 days, right?
Wow.
So we are at 2 dots.
Now
Towards the middle of the
slow,
page.
though, right?
Yes, we're going to go much slower today. We do not have to go as fast as we did the last couple of days.
I try to look for where,
It's not enjoyable.
1 speed, 1.5, 2. I was looking for the 0.5.
It was very fast. Arev hayotze le'achar chisum shtaros. So a contract has the loan all correct, all written in it, and then it's got 2 witnesses signed. So we had a conversation about the guy who's the guarantor. Where is his name on this contract? So if his name shows up after the witnesses, so in that circumstance, the witnesses have signed not on the guarantor, so he's almost like making an oral guarantee after the fact. He's not part of the contract. If his name was before the witnesses, then one might believe that it could be part of the contract. That's going to be what we're going to be discussing. But if it's written after the witnesses, then it's not part of the contract. Therefore, we learned yesterday that there's a difference between collecting debts that are in a contract, in that they create a mortgage on property. You can collect from properties that got sold after the loan. But if it's an oral loan, then you cannot. So Amar Rav says, Kodem chisum shtaros, if the name of the guarantor is before the signatures on the contracts, Gova min nechasim mishubadim, then the name of the guarantor is considered part of the contract, in which case the lien against the guarantor is also a contractual written guarantee, and that means that you can collect from that guarantor even if he sold land in between after the loan and when he's being asked to collect. However, if his name is signed after the names of the witnesses, then we're only going to be able to collect from property that he is currently in possession of, because this is considered an oral loan, not a contractual loan, because, as I said, the witnesses are before his name. Zimnin Amar Rav. There were some times that Rav said, though, the opposite. Afilu kodem chisum shtaros, even if the name of the guarantor was written before the signatures of the witnesses, the guarantor still doesn't have to pay from guaranteed properties. So kasha derav haderav. So you've got 2 different statements that Rav's making.
And how do you know they're guaranteed, though?
How do I know which is guaranteed? How do I know the property, the land is guaranteed?
Yeah.
Because anything that is written down in a contract is considered to be guaranteed, right? Sorry, how do I know he's the guarantor? He's the name. He's the arev. He's the person who wrote his name down in the guarantee. So kasha derav ad Rav. So it's a contradiction between the 2 statements of Rav. Lo kasha, so it's not a problem. Ha dekasav bei ploni arev. Ha dekasav bei ul ploni arev. Very big difference, that one vav. If at the end of the contract, the name is written, so-and-so is the guarantor, even if they sign the witnesses, we don't know whether the witnesses are signing on the fact that he's the guarantor or just the contract. We presume that whenever we have a doubt of these sorts, when it comes to contracts, we always go to the lenient approach, and we assume that the contract is what the witness is signed on. However, if the contract says, and so-and-so is the guarantor, then we know that the sofer was writing in this guarantor as part of the contract, because hence the word and connecting the guarantor to the name of the people in the contract. So therefore the witnesses are signing on that, and therefore it's considered part of the contract. For Rabbi Yochanan, Rabbi Yochanan says, Echad zeh ve'echad zeh. He says, no, either way, gova ela min nechasim b'nei chorin, you're always still, even if it sounds like Rabbi Yochanan saying, even if the word and is in that contract, it does not connect this guarantor back to the original contract, and so therefore you cannot collect from land that has been sold afterwards. V'afal gav dekasev bei u ploni arev, even if their extra vav is written in there. So meisiv Rava. So Rava asks a question on that. We had a case that's going to sound like Rabbi Yochanan is going to hold the other way. He says, Edim hachasumin al she'ilas shalom beget. Puzzle. Let's say you've got some witnesses and let's say this husband decides he's going to be cute, right? They didn't have letters and mail post, but he knows he's got to write this document to his wife to divorce. It's also a great opportunity to say hi to his buddies in the other city. So he writes into this get contract and also say hi to my friends in such and such city, right? He writes this extra message into the contract. And the witnesses sign this contract. Now, the question is, what are the witnesses signing on? Are they
witnesses after?
Well, we're going to check witnesses. We always check witnesses, right? But what is it that the witnesses are signing on? So, if the witnesses are signing when the witnesses sign, so we're going to presume that they're only signing on the little nice message that he put at the end, and therefore the get is invalid. It's possible. We are concerned that maybe these witnesses are only signing on that last little section where he said, "Until my friend Richard that I said hello."
Why would you ever have Adam sign on something like that?
That's a great question, right? What would be the ultimate purpose? But we don't necessarily. Witnesses can sign on anything, but it just comes to the exclusion of something else. We also learned through Maseches Gittin that husbands can be very, very mean when it comes to gets and things. And this would be a great method to torment somebody, right? Here's the final, you send the get, you look through the whole thing and you go, oh, wait a second. There's a line in here that kind of invalidates everything. That's how I was looking at this, going that this is just
what's wrong with
another taunting message.
What's wrong with that? With saying something like that in the contract? He's not denying the.
Well, the only thing is that we need to make sure that when you call the witnesses over, right? Yeah. Are they witnesses on everything that's on this piece of paper, or the last thing that they just saw on the piece of paper?
Like the regards part.
That's the regards part. We had a case in the Gemara a few weeks ago where somebody had a line on the piece of paper, right? And they signed the witnesses after that, and we didn't want to validate that contract with the line on it because it could be the witnesses were signing about the fact that there was a line, right? What would they be signing? Because they wanted to indicate that there was nothing that they shouldn't have been able to cross out that was underneath. So the witnesses signed that this was a line that didn't invalidate anything in this contract. But so much so that we're basically presuming that the witnesses are only signing on the thing that was immediately before their signature, not the whole thing. You're right. It's an interesting, but how would you distinguish otherwise? In other words, if the witnesses were only signing on that last part, how would you have written it?
Could you obviously call back the witnesses and have them testify?
You could, yes. That would be
a matter of.
There's always many steps in
a contract. But what we normally do is we duplicate over and over some of the things so that it's clear what is exactly, and then we also said that we repeat the main part of the contract in the last line again, right, for the same purpose. The Amar Rabbi Yavo says, so now, according to what, so Rabbi Yavo explained this, I'll explain this in the name of Rabbi Yochanan. Sha'alu pasol, if they're just asking to say hello, so then the get is invalid. Vesha'ilu kosher. But if it says and they asked, so then the get is kosher. Which sounds like, again, because the and connects and says the witnesses are signing not only on the last part, but it's and this last part is connected to the previous. It joins it together again. So that means Rabbi Yochanan makes a distinction whether there's an and or there isn't an and. That's very good, except that's not what Rabbi Yochanan said when we were talking about the cases of the Arev. When it came to the Arev, it sounded like Rabbi Yochanan made no distinction with the and. So how are we going to explain? So the answer is Hachanami dekasav ploni Arev. You're right. Actually, Rabbi Yochanan does make the distinction. Even in the case of the guarantor, we must have quoted it wrong in the first place, and that in fact, Rabbi Yochanan's distinction is, again, that he makes the distinction, says that if it only says ploni, then the guarantor is not, the witnesses are considered to have not signed on the guarantor part. But ploni would be. Ihachi hainu derav. So if that's the case, then how is Rabbi Yochanan arguing a Rav? That's exactly what Rav said. Rav said if it says and, then it connects. And if it doesn't say and, it doesn't connect. Now you're saying Rabbi Yochanan holds the same way? So the answer is Ema v'chein amar Rabbi Yochanan. So the answer is, you're right. It's the same thing. Rabbi Yochanan was we quoted Rabbi Yochanan not to be a contradiction, but to be a support. Rabbi Yochanan was saying the same thing as Rav. We'll do just a little drop more. Ma'isa ubal lifnei Rabbi Yishmael. There was a story that came before Rabbi Yishmael. So Amar Rabbi Barachana, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Rabbi Barachana said to Rabbi Yochanan, Afa pishakiles Rabbi Yishmael es ben nanas. At the end of the Mishnah, Rabbi Yishmael is talking about how amazing ben nanas is. And he was arguing with ben nanas a moment ago. Even though Rabbi Yishmael praises ben nanas, halacha kamoso, the halacha is like Rabbi Yishmael, right? He was making a big thing about how amazing Rabbi Nanas is, but the halacha actually follows Rabbi Yishmael. So now let's ask the following question. Bechanuk, and that was about whether the guarantor has to make a kinyan or not in order to be able to acquire, be part of the to be responsible to pay. So iboiluhu. And he's getting involved out of the fact. So the question is like this: Bechanuk, Mali, what would be the case? We had that example in the Mishnah. Somebody walking down the street and seeing somebody else being strangled, and this guarantor jumps in and he says, "I will rescue the guy." Right? So Rabbi Yishmael said that was what the case. Rabbi Yishmael said that is a guarantee. He's a guarantor. And Ben Nana says no, that loan was never made with him in mind, so therefore he's not a guarantor. And even Rabbi Yishmael said we like Ben Nanas, but the halacha follows Rabbi Yishmael. Question is, okay, let's say the case was that the fellow's being strangled. So I'm Rabbi Yishmael, Tashma, Rabbi Yishmael says, come and listen to Rabbi Yaakov, Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yaakov said to Rabbi Yochanan, Cholak hayir Rabbi Yishmael af bechanuk, that Rabbi Yishmael even disagreed in the case of the strangling, and he says that even in a case where he's coming and he's seeing somebody being strangled, when he says, I'll be the guarantor, he means it. Halacha kamoso, and the halacha is like him. Oin halacha kamoso, or is the halacha not like him? Tashma, come and listen. Techiyasa Rabbi, Rabbi Yochanan, Rabbi came from Israel, said to Rabbi Yochanan, Cholak hayir Rabbi Yishmael af bechanik. The Rabbi Yishmael had argued in the case also where one person was being strangled. The halacha kamoso af bechinuk, but the halacha is in fact like him, even in the case of strangulation. This is a good place for Sabab Basra, and we will finish up the last little drop. The last little drop finishes on Shabbos, and we are getting ourselves going. All right, everybody, let's go to Sanhedrin. We're going to start Sanhedrin on the very first page of Sanhedrin. As we give the books out. Sorry?
Which page are you talking about?
So that's actually the page I'm going to start with. Because every Gemara starts with Daf Beis. And so since it's our first...
Only one. I know.
Since our first Gemara together, the question that is famously asked, where did Daf Aleph go? Right? Where's Daf Aleph? So the simple explanation of where Daf Aleph is that when the printers go to print their Gemaras, right, they need a title page, right? So your first page is take a look at your Gemara, right? You've got a title page, right? Where the name of the Masechta is, right? It says Sanhedrin in big letters and all this. So this is page 1, right? That's the simple answer, right? It tells you all the nice beforshim. That's Daf Beis, right? That's the simple answer. Nobody likes the simple answer because that is not the Kabbalistic answer. Time ain't been hugging.
Only one out.
Always, so first of all, you're never finished. Always linked to the. Also, the next thing is that the first letter in the Torah is Beis and Bereshis. So therefore, also the first letter of every Gemara, also Beis. Another explanation I saw that Tamei Minhagim says that it's to prevent people from bragging. You might be able to say, look, I finished all Masechta, I learned it. And you should remember that you didn't even learn page 1, right? Don't think you learned it so far. Didn't even learn page 1. And then there's the famous story that Reb Shlomo Carlebach says about the Munkitcher passports. And since we're not speeding through, we're going to just quickly tell the famous Reb Shlomo Carlebach story. Reb Shlomo Carlebach tells the story of his uncle who goes to the Munkitcher Rebbe. He has to travel from Munkach to Berlin right before the Second World War. And it's very dangerous to go traveling around there. You cannot simply use passports of various countries through because the passports are not going to be valid at any given time. So therefore, he goes to the Munkitcher Rebbe and he says, how can you get me a passport so that I can be able to get to Berlin? So Munkitcher Rebbe says, he goes, okay, let me take care of it. He goes into his room and he's there for a while. He comes out with a blank piece of paper covered in tears. And he says, here, use this. Now, this chassid, has emunah in his Rebbe. He's a little bit nervous, but when he gets to the border, and he's supposed to present his papers, his passport, he's going to pull out a blank piece of paper and say, here, But he doesn't because it's his Rebbe. So he does, and he pulls it out. And everybody takes a look at this paper, and they treat him like royalty wherever he goes. And it doesn't matter which border, which army he presents it to. Every single person who sees it looks at this paper, and it's almost like he's giving them like diplomatic status and papers, and is able to travel unhindered through the difficult war-torn areas and be able to reach his destination and come back slowly. And I forgot to mention at the beginning, the story starts off where this. Where he asks his grandchildren to please bury him with this blank piece of paper, and the children ask him, "What is the blank piece of paper?" And he tells them this whole story, and he says that if the Munkacher passport was able to open all of these gates in this world, imagine what it will be able to open and for me in the world to come. And Rosh Shlomo Carlebach ends his story with Daf Aleph. That's our Munkacher passport to be able to get us into the Gemara. So that's the Chassidish story of the Munkacher story.
We just finished the first stop. Now we're going to the second
That's correct. We just finished Daf Aleph. So now on to Daf Beis. Daf Beis. So we're going to become experts in how to build a court. Right? That's what Sanhedrin is about. The main topic of it is that we're going to learn all of the rules of all the various types of courts. The first Mishnah takes the entire Amud.
Wow.
Right in the Mishnayos and if you open up a Mishnah Sanhedrin, this is broken up into several Mishnayos. It's not all one Mishnah, but the Gemara lumps it all together, all of a similar topic. But the Gemara is going to break it out, of course, in the Gemara style to break it into small chunks, piece by piece. So there's a lot of exposition that we have to bring into this Mishnah because there are a lot of cases of judgment. We have to explain what they are. So dini mamonis bishlosha. Let's start off with the fact that the Gemara says monetary laws require 3 judges. Do we have a chumash available?
Yeah, I'll go on.
Let's just have a chumash available. There are 3 judges. The Gemara is going to explain where it is that we learn this from. Gezelos vechavalos. If somebody steals, so then 3 judges. If you have somebody get hit by another person and it causes damage, thank you. We're gonna need a shmos, but that's perfect. That's what I'm looking for. Okay, good. Okay, I did not specify. Not your fault. So, chavalos. If I hit another person, so there's going to be damages that are going to be associated with this with the crime of hitting somebody. Right? You're going to have to pay his doctor bills. You're going to have to pay his loss from work. You're going to have to pay any embarrassment, any pain and suffering. You have all of these payments, and that is determined by a court of 3. Nezek v'chatzi nezek. Let's say I have a situation of nezek as damages. I have my damages caused by, let's say, an ox or some other kind of damage that is caused to another person's property. We also have a damage called chatzi nezek, circumstance where the damages are halved, where I have an ox that causes damage. The ox gores, causes damage of, we call it keren damage caused by goring, and that's done by an ox, which is not considered to be something normal that an ox does. Normally, the ox is tame and nice and polite, and this ox, however, starts to gore, and it has not done so repeatedly, so there's no reason for us to presume that he's going to continue to do it. During the first payments, then the second payment, the owner is only going to pay half of the value of the damages that he causes. So that's a case of chatzi nezek. Chatzi nezek also requires 3 judges. Tashlumei kefel is a requirement to pay double the value of an item if you're a thief. If you steal something, right, and you are caught and you have the item, so then you have to pay a double payment. You pay it back plus a penalty of the second of paying it for a second time. Also, tashlumi arba v'chamisha. The Torah tells us that if you steal a sheep or an ox, so then you are obligated to pay 4 or 5 times the item that you stole. Right, so you're going to wind up paying more for stealing those particular items.
You're being charged interest.
That's a good
Yeah, if you shech them or you sell them, right? Shecht or sell. If you still have them in your possession, then you're going to pay double like everything else.
If you're paying double, it's like you're being charged interest, which you're not allowed.
No, because this is a court. This is a court and a knas, right? A interest would only be between 2 individuals that are lending, right? In a lending case. Okay.
Call a person. That is.
So that's bishlosha. Those are all cases of 3 judges. Ha'ones ve'hamefate. So now, let's say somebody rapes a basula, a girl, ve'hamefate, or somebody convinces her by tricking her, and they have relations. And so there's a monetary fine in both of those circumstances paid to the father, right? So in judging those cases, we also have a court that has to convene. Vehamotzi shemra. Also, we have a circumstance called motzi shemra. Motzi shemra is the circumstance where he makes up a story, but this is not the general making up a story. Motzi shemra in the Torah refers to the specific case where a man gets married, and then in the morning he gets up and says that she's not a basula. Right? She's not a basula. You lied to me, and the intent is either to break the marriage or maybe at least reduce the ksuba contract, right? Because it's not basula. But he says that she's not a basula. So the father goes and finds the sheets and proves that there's blood on the sheets, and therefore the husband is a liar. In that circumstance, there's a fine and a penalty that the husband has to pay. Since it's all of these are cases of monetary penalties. So the halacha is, bishlosha, there are going to be 3 judges. Divrei Rabbi Meir, that's what Rabbi Meir says. These are all monetary cases. When somebody's found guilty of any of these offenses, the Torah prescribes a financial penalty. And financial penalties are being consistently judged with 3 judges. The Chachamim disagree, and they say, Motzi Shemra be'esrim ushlosha. If you're going to be in a case of Motzi Shemra, then 23 judges. Why? Because 23 judges are the number of judges we're going to learn. Those are going to be the number of judges you need to judge capital cases. Okay,
For capital punishment, for example.
that's correct. Right. So if somebody's going to be killed, somebody's going to get a death sentence. So then it's going to be 23 judges. Well, where's the death sentence? Right. The fellow, the husband, is just saying that he's a liar, and so now he's going to have to pay. Right. But there is a circumstance where, let's say, the husband's right. If the husband's telling the truth, then it's going to come out quite possibly that the woman committed adultery. And remember that in those days, the marriage was done in 2 parts. The erusin was done a year before, and the nisuin was done just now, right? So that's correct. So now that means that he may accuse her of not being a basula, and then the court will convene, and they will find out that he's telling the truth. And then when they investigate the matter, they'll find that she committed adultery, and then there's a death sentence there. Therefore, there's going to be 23 judges. So if you're going to have an accusation, if the husband's going to come along and he's going to claim that that she wasn't a basula, and the father's going to say, you're lying, well, we better get the 23 judges together, because ultimately, if we follow this case to its end, there is a potential death sentence that could come out of it.
Why is the sentence so harsh?
Why a death sentence?
Yeah.
We always say Gzeras HaKosa. We're going to get used to the idea that we're following whatever it is that the Torah prescribes. The Torah is telling us that the appropriate thing to do for adultery is one of the big 3 of Eros, right? Idolatry, adultery, and murder. Those are the big 3. Those are going to be capital punishments.
Who's the obligation on? Is like if I say she was John Doe, whatever. It says it's a Betsula. It wasn't a Betsula.
Yep.
Shouldn't it be on him to have to prove it?
The responsibility of
you're saying so
again,
because he said it was the father who had to go get the sheets, but usually when we say
because whoever we're trying to take money from, the burden of proof is on the person who is trying to. The burden of proof is always on the accuser, right?
Right. That's the husband in this case.
The husband is not accusing. The husband is saying she's not a basula, right? The father is accusing him of lying, and therefore he's trying to get payment for his fault, his lie.
But isn't him by saying she's not? Isn't that an accusation?
Well, he's not saying that his wife owes him anything.
Right.
So therefore, right, he's not claiming anything. Only the father's the one making the claim.
But is this and the sheets? If the sheets, there's nothing on the sheets. That's the proof.
If there's that's not going to be a proof. It's just going to say we don't know, but we're not going to hold the husband responsible. Right? We're going to have to do more investigating, obviously, and the potential for the outcome of the case is we might investigate and find more information.
Right. Okay.
But just that information is not going to be enough.
No. Okay.
So, in a court of 23 judges, like how did they deliver a judgment? Like, do you have to have like 12 judges
Yes.
in one direction? Like,
We're gonna-
simple majority.
Coming up,
13. 13, no, 12, right? 12. Okay.
It will be 12 to 11, but not to give away the ending of the Gemara, but since you're asking. So we're going to see that when it comes to a judgment of guilty, you always need to judge at least 2 against. So it would have to wind up being 13-10, because you can never have 12, right? It can't be 12 because it'd be 13. So it'd be 13-10, but in order to acquit, then it could be 12 to 11. But we'll see. When we see what we'll get to the Gemara later on, the Gemara is going to discuss those things. Okay. Makos, if it's going to be a judgment that you're going to, the punishment is going to be for a regular los aseh, you're going to get malchus, you're going to lashes for it. So bishlosha, you're going to only need 3 judges. Mishum Rabbi Yishmael Amru, but Rabbi Yishmael says, as for Bishlosha, you need 23 judges for that as well. We're going to see why Rabbi Yishmael holds that way.
If you get lashes, you can handle it. You can die from all those lashes.
Yeah, they're going to evaluate. We're going to see when we get to Maseches Makos how we're going to evaluate that, but not today. Ibor HaChodesh, let's say the court is convening in order to determine whether this month is going to have 29 days or it's going to have 30 days. So they're declaring Rosh Chodesh. So then, Bishlosha, you need 3 judges for determining for Rosh Chodesh. Ibor Hashana, now the judges are convening, and they have to decide whether this is going to be a leap year. We know that there's 348 days in the lunar year, 365 days in the solar year. You're going to lose a number of days, and sorry, I said that wrong. It's 354 days in the lunar year, 365 in the solar year. It's 11 days off. So every single year, there's going to be an 11 years that it's going to start falling backwards. In order to keep, the Torah tells us that you've got to keep Pesach as a spring holiday. It's called the spring holiday. So in order to keep it as a spring holiday, in order to balance, you're going to have to sometimes add an extra month into the lunar calendar, the Jewish calendar, in order to balance. That'll make it a leap year. So that we're going to do 7 times every 19 years in order to balance, so we have the same number of days in a lunar over 19 years. Adding in 7 extra months, you have the exact same number of days in a lunar year, in lunar 19 years and a solar 19 years. So that's how we balance it out. But the determination of which years into a leap year is going to be up to the Beis Din. So Beis Din's going to decide. When they sit down to make that calculation, Bishlosha, Divrei Rabbi Meir says, all you need are 3 judges. Rabbi Shimon Gamliel says, Bishlosha Maschilin, we begin the process with 3 judges. Ubechamisha nos in venosnin, and then they're going to argue it out with the calculations. They're going to need 5 judges for that part.
And if it escalates, then you
The Gomrin B'Shiva, and you're going to conclude the case with 7 judges. The Im Gomru B'Gimel, but let's say they couldn't get all the judges. If you finished and you just had 3 judges throughout, Mu'baris, that is sufficient. That will work, and you can make a leap year just with those 3 judges. Okay, next. Smichas Zikanim Va'arifas Egla. So if we have a case of Par Helim Davar, okay, what happens is like this. The sages got together and they were asked, what is a halacha on a particular thing? And the rabbis of this Beis Din made a psak that the halacha is that this meat is acceptable. And everybody in the community hears that psak. They read the halachic newsletter, right? And the Beis Din said that this is acceptable. And they go and they follow what it is that they said. Then it turns out that they realized they made an error. But the error is not the individual people's error. The error is the error of the Beis Din. So the requirement to bring a korban is on the Beis Din. Call that the Par Ha'elam Davar. That is the bull that is brought for when a Beis Din makes a mistake. The individuals, normally when an individual makes a mistake and he does an Avera, so then he has to bring a korban chatos. But since they didn't do it, they followed what the Chachamim told them to do, they're not at fault.
When do the Chachamim have to bring a korban chatas because of the...
They're not going to bring a chatos. They're going to bring a par ha'elam davar because it's a specific type of circumstance. So one of the parts of the process is they have to lean on the animal. When they do that process, so we're going to see they're going to need a certain number of judges as far as that. Also, varifas egla arufa. We're going to see the egla. Let's say you have a murder victim found between 2 towns, and you don't know which town the person came from. So what you do is you measure which town which town the corpse is closer to, and you bring a beis din from that town. And there's a process called the egla rufa, the breaking of the neck of the calf. You bring the calf to a location. We can describe how that's done in the Gemara, but they're going to bring the calf to.
If that town doesn't have a base, then
That town will have a beis din. That's why we're bringing it close. We're going to measure to the closest town that will have a beis din, and we're going to perform this egla rufa ceremony. Bishlosha, we need 3 members of a beis din for those ceremonies. Divrei Rabbi Shimon says, Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Bechamisha. Rabbi Yehuda says we're going to need 5 judges for that. Hachalitza, let's say we have a case of chalitza. This is a circumstance where a man dies. He has no children. He's married. He has no children. And he has a brother. So the brother has the responsibility to marry his wife. However, the Chachamim tell us that ideally that's not the way that things should go. It would be better for them to have sort of what's called a divorce ceremony. The Torah calls it a chalitza ceremony. They separate from each other using this chalitza ceremony. That chalitza ceremony is what we're talking about. Veha mi'unin. Mi'unin is, we said that a father is allowed to marry off his daughter to somebody before she is an adult. If she's not an adult, he can accept a kedushin. A man can give him money, and he can accept that money as kedushin, and his daughter is married. If the father dies, if the father's dead, then there's nobody to accept kedushin on her behalf. So then the Chachamim allowed the mother or her brothers to accept kedushin on her behalf. However, since that's not a halacha deoraisa, the Chachamim established that the girl has the right to refuse. She can say, I don't want to be. But if she does this refusal, it's called a miyun process. It has to go to beis din, and we need bishlosha. We need 3 judges for that. Neta revoi. Let's say we have a crop that somebody plants. So for the first 3 years, the fruit of the tree grows. That's produce that cannot be used for the first 3 years, right? That's orla. And then in its 4th year, we call it neta revoi. Neta revoi, the 4th year planting, gets harvested, and it has to be eaten in Yerushalayim. So you might be very eager to eat it. You've waited for 3 years. Therefore, the Chachamim, the rule is that you have to take the crop and you have to have it evaluated and based in when you redeem it, so that you don't shortchange the value of the crop. And then you're going to bring that value of money, because it's much easier than transporting whole cartloads of oranges. It's easier to carry money. So therefore you can carry money to Yerushalayim and then purchase whatever food you want, go out to dinner in Yerushalayim and eat whatever food you want when you're in Yerushalayim. That's the case of Neta Revai. Similarly, Meiser Sheni, right? Let's say we have in years, in a 7-year Shemitah cycle, years 1, years 2, years 4, and years 5, you have a responsibility of taking some part of your produce, you give it to a Kohen. A 10th of what's left, you give it to the Levi, and that's called Meiser Rishon. And then a 10th after that, you are going to eat in Yerushalayim. That's called Meiser Sheni. So you're going to take part of your produce, and you're going to redeem that as well. So if I have Meiser Sheni, I'm a regular orange farmer, so I know that my oranges are worth this much per pound. I can go to the store, see what they're worth, and so therefore I don't need to go to beis din. But if I have Meiser Sheni, she'ein damav yeduin, and my crop, for some reason, it's not clear what the value is, says Rashi, potentially maybe the crop has rotted somewhat so that it's not really fresh, and therefore it has some kind of reduced value. So it's going to need to go, Bishlosh is going to need 3 judges. Ha-hekdeshos, if I'm going to declare something hekdesh, Bishlosh, I need 3 judges. Ha-erechin, ha-metaltalim, let's say I declare that I'm going to give the value of myself to the Beis Hamikdash. Well, the Torah tells us very clearly what the value, how much that should be, right? For different ages, depends on how old you are, males, females, how many shkalim it should be. But now, instead of bringing money, I would like to bring movable property in the equivalent value of the money that I owe. Well, now I need an evaluation, because I've got to figure out how much my items are worth. So again, Bishlosh, I need 3 judges. Rabbi Yehuda says, Echod mehen Kohen. In these circumstances, one of the judges has to be a Kohen, because they're going to be involved in receiving the money. Therefore, a Kohen is important as being part of the beis din. V'har karkos, let's say I have land. So we can have land that is designated or donated, and now it has to be redeemed from the Beis Hamikdash. So again, I need a beis din in order to evaluate the value of this land. Tisha, I need 9 judges, V'kohen, and another additional Kohen to be part of that process. The Adam Kayotze Bahen, similarly, if a person donates a slave, similarly, like slaves and humans, or slaves and land, are considered to be in the same category. 9 judges plus a Kohen in order to evaluate those
You
properties.
said this in Baba Basra, that a slave is like land.
Yes, we did. We're going to see a lot of repeating themes. The more we do in Shas, we're going to get it and see it over and over and over again. Dina nefashos be'esrim u'shlosha. If I've got a life and death circumstance, there's a murder charge or some other sentence, some other crime where the punishment is death, so I need 23 judges. Haroveya vehanirva. Let's say somebody has relations with an animal, right? Or so besrim b'shlosha. That's a murder charge. You need 23. And not only that, but not only for the person, but for the animal as well. Shenemar, because the pasuk says, "V'harag to es ha'isha," you're going to kill the woman, the es ha'behema, and the animal as well. The Omar, the es ha'behema tarogu. So you're going to kill the animal. So now that tells us that just as the woman gets killed for this crime, so to the animal. But just as the woman requires a basin of 23, as is all cases where the punishment is going to be a death sentence. So that judgment of 23 is what's required for the animal as well, and we're going to need a basin of 23 to convene.
Can I ask you a question?
Would it also be a guy too?
Yes. So that's the 2 cases. Haroveya is the person who is on the receiving end of relations, and a nirva is the person who is having relations with an animal. So yes, for a guy too. Yes.
So when if I say this land, if I make a macha and I say this land is hefker, or I say if I allocate something to Meister Sheni, you tell me without 3 dayanim, it's not good enough.
The self-evaluation. It has to be, as we said,
It has to be in front of judges.
for Meister Sheni, only if the produce is not clear what its value is.
Right.
Right? If it's regular flour or wheat or something like that, people know what its value is.
And hefker? I can't just say this. If I said this land is hefker, that's
Land is, as he said, land is going to require a basin. We'll see the parameters in the
so
circumstance.
that statement means
Because
nothing.
land, evaluation or appraisal of land is not so simple. And no 2 pieces of land are alike. Right?
Interesting. So my statement means nothing alone without the.
had 7 children.
Your statement means no. Your statement means that you're liable. Now we got to get a court together in order to figure out how much it is.
Oh, okay. Fine.
Right?
It's an evaluation. That's what.
That's correct.
Oh, okay, fine. That's it.
Shur haniska, let's say I have an ox that kills a person. So it is going to receive a death sentence. It's going to get stoned. Besrim Mishlosh, it's going to need 23 judges. Shinamar, as Pasuk says, Hashur Yisakel, you're going to stone the ox, V'gam ba'alav you must, and also the owner will die. The owner does not die if the ox kills. Why is the Pasuk telling us that? Kemisas ba'alim, it's to tell us that just as the owner would die if he was liable for a death penalty, kach misas ashur, that is the same procedure for killing the ox if he is liable for a death sentence. Hazev v'ari v'adov, hadov v'anamar v'arbardalos, v'hanachash. Let's say I have a wolf, I have a lion, I have a bear, I have a leopard. A bardalos says is a polecat is what the art scroll says. I'm not sure what a polecat is, but it's some other, either hyenas is another translation I saw, v'hanachash, or snakes. These are all dangerous animals. Misas and be'esrim u'shlosha, if you're going to kill these, you need to convene a beis din, establish that they are in fact deadly animals, and then kill them. Rabbi Eliezer says, Kol hakodim lahorgan zacha. No, whoever gets to them first kills them. That's a good thing because they're dangerous, right? We always are going to presume them to be ready to kill somebody. So shoot first, ask later.
They don't attack you. Wouldn't you be Tabal Chaim?
No, that's what we're learning about these. These are animals that as soon as you see them, you're in danger. So you kill them, right? Rabbi Akiva says, Misosim Besrim Mishlosha. No, if you're going to kill them, you need 23 judges. Hey, wait a second. That's what the Tanakama, the first opinion, said. We'll get to that in the Gemara. We're going to ask why Rabbi Akiva repeats. What is he trying to add to the case? Ein Don Loas Hashevet. Now, let's say I have a whole tribe that worships Avodah Zarah. So they're going to determine that that tribe is liable, and then you may be winding up having to kill, right? They have to declare war and kill that tribe. So in order to determine whether that's the case, the law is Navi Sheker also. Let's say I have a prophet, and we're going to determine that that prophet has been lying, and he's telling everybody that God's giving him visions, and he's really not, and he's leading people astray. The law is Kohen Gadol also. I could have a Kohen Gadol who he violates halacha. So in all of those circumstances, we see what the definition of that. He's going to teach a halacha that he himself will then follow. So we only are going to judge those cases LLP based in Shel Shivim Ve'echad. We're going to get the big Sanhedrin of 71 judges together for those cases. That's where we need the Supreme Courts. Vein motzin lemilchames harishus ella alpi based in Shel Shivim Ve'echad. You cannot go to war except if you ask the full court of 71 judges. They have to go ask the court 71 judges. What's in milchames rishus? Everything except what's considered a milchamas mitzvah. Well, that's great. What's a milchamas mitzvah then? There are three types of wars that are milchamas mitzvah. One is self-defense. If you're on the attack, not counter-offenses, but just on the defense. Number two, any war against Amalek. And number three, the war against the 7 nations that are in Canaan. Right?
And those you don't need.
And with those we don't know. We don't know where the Amalek is. We don't know where those you don't need to ask based in. Correct. Because that's a mitzvah in the Torah. Those are clear mitzvah to go fight them.
So anything without you require based in.
Everything else you need to go to the Sanhedrin. Right? Not based in, but the Sanhedrin of 71. Ein mosifin ala ir. Let's say I want to expand the boundaries of Yerushalayim. Boundaries of Yerushalayim have significant halachic consequences because that's where I'm going to be able to eat my Meiser Sheni or my Netzer Ravai. If I'm going to expand those boundaries, so I need the court of 71. Al Ha'azaros. Also, let's say they want to expand the space of the Beis Hamikdash's courtyard. Again, it makes a practical halachic difference. The Beis Hamikdash's courtyard has specific rules that are attached to it. That's an area you can't go while you're tamei. That's an area that you're allowed to sacrifice korbanos. So therefore, since it has you're elevating those areas of land to special status. You can only do that LLP based in Shel Shivim Ve'echad. You need the court of 71 judges to do that. Ein osin Sanhedrios l'shvatim. In order to establish these courts of 23 judges, each of the shvatim had their own court of 23 judges. In order to establish those courts officially, you needed to be LLP based in Shel Shivim Ve'echad. It was the court of 71 that certified those lower courts of 23. Ein osin ir anidachas. You cannot certify to have a city that's worshiping idols. The Torah tells us that you're supposed to destroy that city and burn it and not use any of the possessions from it. So you can't make an irni dachas ela alpi based in Shel Shivim Ve'echad. Unless you have a court, you need the court of 71 to judge that city. That's
interesting because that's a mitzvah, like we said before.
Yes, the mitzvah is to judge it. Right? It says that you're gonna bring the judges and they're gonna judge. And so we're going to see in the psukim that the psukim indicate that there needs to be a judgment from the Sanhedrin first before destroying the city. Ein os nir dachas. Once we're mentioning nir dachas, here's a couple other fine points. Ein os nir dachas b'safar. You're not allowed to make a border city into nir dachas because that leads to security problems, right? Because the enemy is going to see you just destroyed a border city. We can now move in, right? So that you can't do. V'lo shalosh, and you cannot make 3 cities into an irni dachas. Again, you are wind up putting your security situation at risk by destroying too many of your own cities, right? Aval os and achas oshtayim, but you can make 1 or 2. Sanhedrin gedola haisel shel shivim ve'echad, the large Sanhedrin that had 71 judges. Katana shel esrim u'shlosha, the small Sanhedrin, which we've been discussing, has 23 judges. Minayin legedola shehi shel shivim ve'echad. What is the source in the Torah that tells us that the court is 71 judges? Shenamar, as the pasuk says, Moshe Rabbeinu was complaining, I cannot take this nation all by myself. They keep complaining and complaining and complaining. I need help. So Hashem says, Asfali shivim ish miziknei Yisrael. Let's gather up 70 of the elders. And that story was that each of the tribes nominated 6 people, and Moshe Rabbeinu drew lots, and they picked 70 of the 72 candidates. And Eldad and Medad were the 2 people that actually they were selected, but they said, that's okay, we feel bad for the 2 people who weren't selected. You can have our spots. And Eldad and Medad wound up being able to give prophecy even though they weren't part of the Sanhedrin. That's that whole story. But
was it in the middle of the desert or was it
this was in the desert. This was in the desert. So 70, they were gathered together 70. Moshe al Gabehen, and Moshe, of course, was in charge. So that's 70 plus 1. Rabbi Yehuda says, Shivim. No, 70. Don't count Moshe Rabbeinu. The pasuk says 70 was the Sanhedrin. That's the number. Don't count Moshe Rabbeinu in that. What is the source that tells us 23 judges is the number for the small Sanhedrin? Shenamar, as the pasuk says, V'shaftu ha'edu ha'eda v'hitzilu ha'eda. In a court case, you need to have the congregation judge them and the congregation save them. Well, the way you read the pasuk, it sounds like you have a choice, right? The congregation can find them guilty or find them innocent. The Gemara says, no, it means both. You need a congregation that finds them, in order for there to be a valid court, you need to have the capacity to have a congregation that finds them guilty and a congregation that finds them innocent. So how much is a congregation? So we learned from the spies, the Meraglim, they're called an Eidah, and there's 10 of them, right? Because they're 12 spies, but Yoshua and Kalev are good, so they're not part of the Eidah Hara Azos.
Lied about the land.
Sorry, and the other 10 lied about the land. They're the Eidah Hara Azos. The Eidah is 10. So therefore, we need 10. In any good court, you need 10 that say guilty, 10 that say innocent. So
Source for a minion also?
that is also the source for the minion, yes. Right?
From the Regalim?
For the Meraglim.
The Meraglim?
Yes.
I thought it was from Avram Avinu when he said, and he got down to at least 10 good men.
Right.
I thought that was
It's both.
not from the Meraglim.
We'll see. It's machlok. It's two different opinions in the Gemara, but the Gemara does. They came out.
The brothers Yosef.
Brothers with Yosef was
Yeah,
another,
they had a-
but there were
right,
only
they had a
9
base
brothers
there.
there, right? That's happens to be this week's parsha, right? So we'll be able to speak it out that they make a based-in together in order to be able to prevent them from speaking and telling anybody about the fact that their brother was killed, so that Yaakov never finds out about it.
When Yosef was so.
But there weren't 10 of them because, of course, Yosef is not included there,
Yeah, but
and
Reuven-
Binyamin was at home, and Reuven went off to do tshuva.
Right.
He wasn't
That
there
was-
that day, so there were only 9 brothers. So therefore, they brought Hashem into their based-in. Hashem was the 10th one in their based-in, and that's why, even though not only did the brothers not tell Yaakov, but Yaakov doesn't have a nevuah about Yosef being in Mitzrayim for 22 years as well. Hashem is involved in that based-in as well. But yes, so these are all sources. But the Eidah is the source for the fact that a congregation is a minyan, and this is also a source. We're using this word here, Eidah, to tell me that I need 10 and 10 on my based-in. Okay, so now I understand how you've gotten to 20 members of my based-in. How do I get to 23? So therefore, I need Eidah Shofet to say to Matzelas Harekan Esrim. That's 20. Minayin le'Eidah Shiasara. How do I know that an Eidah is 10? Shenemar Ad Masay le'Eidah Hara Azos. How long do I have to put up with this evil, wicked Eidah, which is the spies? Yatsu Yoshua v'Kalev. That means that you're going to exclude Yoshua and Kalev from the count. Uminayin lavi od shlosha. Where do the other 3 judges come from? Mimashma shenemar. So that comes from the fact that the pasuk says, Lo siya acharei rabim l'ros. You're not supposed to follow even a majority for evil. So shomeani she'eyen mehem l'tova. So that means that I can follow a majority for a positive judgment. Okay, in Cain, if that's true, so lama never, then why does the pasuk have to say afterwards, acharei rabim lahatos? You're going to go after the majority. Of course I can go after the majority. I can't go after the majority to find somebody guilty. That means I can go by the majority to find somebody innocent, but then you tell me I go after the majority. So that's obvious. So therefore, the answer is to explain like this. You go after the majority, but you go after the majority for good. When you go after the majority for bad, lo kahatayas chol l'tova hatayas chol l'ra. You don't, the rules of majority, we're also going after majority, but the rules of majority for finding guilty are not the same as the rules of majority for finding innocent. Hatayas chol l'tova al pi echad. When you find somebody not guilty, you need a simple majority, by 1. That's all you need, by 1. Hatiyas chol l'ra al pi shnayim. In order to find somebody guilty, you need to have at least 2 more negative votes.
What you were mentioning earlier.
So therefore, that's right. So therefore, that brings me up, in order to have a guilty verdict now, I need 22, because I need 12 to 10. Okay? Vein based in shekel, but you can never have a based in of an even number, because then you could have a hung jury, right?
Yeah.
So you can't have an even number, so that brings us to 23. Okay, how many people, we're going to have this court of 23 judges. What size city gets a court of 23 judges?
Small city.
So, Meya ve'esrim. I need to have 120 people. That's what they're going to say. The Gemara is going to explain where do they get that number from. Rabbi Nechemia says, Masai Mushloshim, 230 people. I have 230 people in my city. Why? Keneged Sari Asaros. We have in the Chumash that Yisro comes into the desert and he sees that Moshe Rabbeinu's got all these people waiting for him. So he comes up with this very clever plan. We're going to have lower courts. Every 10 people, we're going to make a judge. And then every 10 judges, we're going to make another judge. So we want Asara, Meya, Alafim, and you're going to have all these judges. Well, that means the minimum number of people you need to have a judge is 10. So therefore, 230 gives us 23 judges. And that's the minimum number of people for 23 judges. Now, the Gemara is going to wonder whether the 23 is included in the 230 or not. Okay. Says the Gemara. Okay. The Mishnah started off, we start back at the very beginning. Dine Mamonis B'Shlosha, 3 judges for monetary matters. Then it says 3 judges for stealing and for when you hurt somebody and you have to pay them for it. What are you talking about? Is that a separate category? When you hurt somebody, you have a financial obligation. When you steal, you have a financial obligation. Those are dini mamonis. So why is it listed twice? So Amar Rabbi Avo. Rabbi Avo says, Mahain Katani. The Mishnah is giving an explanation. The Mishnah opens up and it says, Mahain dini mamonis. Hey, what are 3 judges what are the rulings of money that you need 3 judges for? Gzelos v'chavalos. The cases of stealing and the cases of hitting people, those are the cases. Aval, however, you know it's not? Hodos v'halvos. So he says, that means that aval hodos v'halvos, low. But when it comes to loans and a person admitting that he owes somebody money, I don't need 3 judges for those. Right? Potentially a single judge is all I might need. Or we're going to see what they might need. But I don't need 3 judges.
He's wrong. In any case, all cases you need 3 judges.
We know too much because we already learned in Babasra that we always had these 3 judges. So how could he hold that there's one? What's he holding? So hang on, we're going to see what he would hold. What would Rabbi Avo hold? How many judges does he need for these cases of Hodos Valvo? So hang on to that. Utricha. Now I do need this because the Itana Dine Mamonis, if the Mishnah had only written the words Dine Mamonis in the first place, Hava Mina Fil Hodos Valvos, I might have thought that it included all monetary cases, including loans and including admissions. Sorry?
I don't think he's blaming the Mishnah here.
Well, he's not blaming the Mishnah. He's just saying, well, why is it that Mishnah writes this weird language that we had to interpret? Right? Tana gzelos v'chavalos, and therefore we've got to teach that it means only stealing and chavalos and when you hurt somebody. V'tana gzelos v'chavalos, if all the Mishnah had started off by saying, hey, if you've got stolen things or somebody's getting hit, so then you need 3 judges, and it didn't tell us that 3 judges, that dinim mamonis, that monetary cases also need 3 judges. Hava mina, I would have thought, hu adin da'afilu hodos valvos. That I would have thought that, you know what? It's true. Even cases of admitting and cases of loans also need 3 judges. Why did the Mishnah skip those cases and go right to the cases of theft or when you hit somebody? Mishum Ikar Gimel Diksivi Big Zelos V'Chavalos Ksivi. Because the source for the rule of 3 judges is written in the Torah about the cases regarding stealing and wounding somebody. So therefore, it makes sense that the Mishnah would say that the rule, even though it applies in all cases of mamonis, we're going to say that the rule of 3 judges by money comes from the cases of Gzelos V'Chavalos. Okay, so. Therefore, we learn both of them. We need to state both of these things. Dini Mamonis to tell me that Dini Mamonis means 3, and those cases of Dini Mamonis are Gzelos v'Chavolos specifically, not judgments of loans or admitting that you owe money. Where's the source? Gzelos d'chsiv. So we go to Parshas Shmos, Parak Chav Beis, Pasuk Zayin. And it says, dealing in thefts. Okay? Pasuk says, we're here. Kiten ish el reyehu kesef okelim lishmor. Person gives money to his friend in order to watch them. So, veguna mi beis ha'ish, and then it gets stolen. So somebody is going to watch my stuff for me, and then somebody comes and steals it from me. Imi matzeh aganav. Yishalim Shem. If you find that thief, he's going to pay double. Im lo yimatzeh aganav. If you don't find that thief, so then you got to find the page. So then, v'nikrav bal habayis ela Elohim. The owner of the house is going to come to the judge. Im lo shalach yado b'melechas reyehu, and he has to take an oath that he did not steal it himself. Okay? Al kol davar pesha, al shor, al chamor, anything that he can have an affliction against, whether it's an ox, whether it's a donkey, al seh, al sama, whether it's a sheep, whether it is a garment, al kol aved, or any lost item, asher yomar ki hu zeh, that any item that he says, this is it. So ad Elohim yavo, he comes to the judge. Devar shneihem, the argument between the two of them, Asher Yeshu'un Elohim, and there's the third time it says the word Elohim. So the word Elohim in these psukim is stated 3 times. Since the word Elohim, judges, is stated 3 times in these psukim, it tells us that we need 3 judges. Okay? So that's Diker Gimel is Diksivi, Bigzelos V'chalav Valos. Dichsiv, V'nikrav Balabais Elohim. So that's where the pasuk is written. So now, Mali Chavel Begufo, Mali Chavel B'mamono. So he says, okay, so that's a case of money, right? We just read it in the psukim. The psukim are all talking about money. What are you talking about? Wounds. The answer is, afflicting somebody is afflicting somebody, whether it's by taking their money without permission or punching them without their permission. Causing somebody an affliction is causing an affliction, so therefore those two go together. Okay? So now, Tana, we learned, Mahain Dini Mamonis, what is, our Tana is teaching, what is the definition of Dine Mamonis? Right, we better stop here. Should I start? Is he still going? What do you think? Or is he going to keep going while I'm going? Let's finish what I just started here.
They're going to wait for us.
Okay.
Yeah?
Okay, so let's stop here.
Okay, all right. Go ahead.
Marv.
We